Good evening. It was one of the most bizarre scenes you can imagine, but then Ted Bundy was like no other man.
And this morning, just after sunrise, the man suspected of brutally killing 36 women, many of them in Utah, met the long, drawn-out demands of justice. Bundy was executed before an atmosphere that was almost circus-like.
In the early hours of January 23rd, 1989, Ted Bundy woke up knowing that this day would be unlike any other. The cold, windowless cell on death row at Florida State Prison had been his home for years, but today it felt more like a tomb. The clock was ticking, each minute bringing him closer to his execution, a fate he had spent his life evading. As dawn broke at 6 a.m., Bundy's morning began like many others, but the air was thick with tension he couldn't ignore. He knew this might be the last time he would ever see the dull gray light of morning filtering through the cracks of his existence. The routine cup of coffee in his cell felt like a cruel joke, bitter and lukewarm, just like the cold reality of his situation. By 8 a.m., Bundy's legal team, led by Polly Nelson and Jim Coleman, worked frantically, submitting a flurry of last-minute appeals and petitions in both state and federal courts. They argued that Bundy wasn't mentally competent to be executed, hoping to buy him more time. But the system that Bundy had once manipulated so skillfully was now beyond his control. As a former law student who had relished his role as his own attorney, Bundy found himself in an unfamiliar position, powerless. The appeals were denied one by one, and with each rejection, the walls of his cell seemed to close in tighter around him. At around noon, Bundy's fate was sealed when the Supreme Court turned down his final request, leaving him with less than 24 hours to contemplate his life and his crimes. In the early afternoon, Ted Bundy was granted a final visit from his mother, Louise Bundy. For years, Louise had clung to the belief in her son's innocence, despite overwhelming evidence to the contrary. Their meeting was brief, charged with unspoken emotions. The bond between mother and son had been a constant in Bundy's life, a source of unconditional love in an otherwise twisted existence. But the reality of what was coming overshadowed everything. There were no dramatic goodbyes, just a painful acknowledgement of what they both knew, that this would be the last time they would see each other. As Louise left the prison, she was in tears, the weight of her son's actions and his impending death finally crushing her resolve. Later that afternoon, Bundy met with his spiritual advisor, Fred Lawrence. Religion had become a focal point for Bundy in his final years, perhaps a last-ditch effort to find some semblance of redemption or peace. The conversations were private, but the intensity of the moment was palpable. Was Bundy truly seeking forgiveness? Or was this just another act in a life defined by manipulation? Around 5 p.m., as evening approached, Bundy was given one final opportunity to speak publicly. He agreed to an interview with James Dobson, a prominent evangelical Christian. It was Bundy's last chance to spin his story, to leave the world with his version of the truth. During the interview, Bundy blamed his violent tendencies on pornography addiction.
Pornography that deals on a violent level with the sexuality, is that once you become addicted to it, and I look at this as a kind of addiction. Like other kinds of addiction, I would keep looking for more potent, more explicit, more graphic.
Claiming it had fueled his murderous impulses, he expressed remorse, but the sincerity of his words was doubted by many.
I can't really talk about that right now. That's weird.
It's too painful.
I would like to be able to convey to you what that experience is like, but I can't. I won't.
In the end, Bundy was a master manipulator, his every word calculated, his true motives impossible to decipher. After the interview, Bundy was offered his last meal. Unlike many death row inmates who request elaborate final meals, Bundy chose not to make a special request. Instead, he was served the standard last meal: steak cooked medium rare, eggs over easy, toast with butter and jelly, milk and juice. Yet Bundy barely touched the food. Whether it was due to his anxiety, fear, or something else, we may never know. What is clear is that his appetite had vanished, crushed under the weight of what was about to happen. By 8 p.m., the atmosphere around Florida State Prison grew heavier. Outside the prison, a crowd began to gather. Some were there to protest the execution, but many had come to celebrate. For them, Bundy's death was a long-awaited moment of justice, a final act in a saga that had terrorized a nation. The air was charged with a grim sense of anticipation, the night alive with sounds of chanting and the flashing lights of news cameras. Inside his cell, Bundy, who had once boasted about being the most cold-hearted son of a bitch you'll ever meet, was now a broken man, facing the ultimate reckoning. Bundy met with the prison chaplain, who offered prayers and spiritual comfort, and later with his attorney, Polly Nelson, one last time. Nelson later described Bundy as being in a state of near panic, his bravado crumbling as the reality of his imminent death became impossible to ignore. Sleep eluded Bundy that night. He had been offered medication to help him rest, but whether he took it remains uncertain. The hours stretched on, each tick of the clock a reminder that time was running out. The distant clank of cell doors, the murmur of guards, and the occasional outburst from the crowd outside took on an eerie significance, a macabre soundtrack to his final night. Those present later remarked on how Bundy seemed to be grappling with the reality of his situation, fully aware that he had run out of options. At 6 a.m. on January 24, 1989, Bundy was awakened and prepared for his execution. He was given time to shower and dress in clean clothes for the last time. The guards followed protocol with somber precision, their actions marked by an understanding of the gravity of what was about to happen. As the time for his execution approached, Bundy was visibly nervous but reportedly tried to maintain a stoic demeanor. He was offered a sedative to calm his nerves, but he declined. Whether this was an act of defiance or an attempt to face his death with full awareness remains unclear. Either way, Bundy was fully alert as the final minutes of his life approached. Around 6:30 a.m., prison officials arrived to escort Bundy from his cell to the execution chamber. The walk was short but heavy with the weight of what was about to happen. Bundy was flanked by guards and prison officials as he made his way through the narrow corridors. Although he tried to appear composed, witnesses later reported that his fear was palpable. The reality of what was about to happen was unavoidable. At approximately 7 a.m., the room fell silent as Bundy was strapped into the electric chair, grimly known as Old Sparky, a device that had claimed the lives of many before him. He was secured at the wrists, ankles, and chest. His head had been shaved to ensure a better connection for the electrode cap, which was placed on his head along with a saline-soaked sponge. Another electrode was attached to his right leg, and the ritualistic preparation for what was to come only heightened the sense of dread. The witnesses, 42 in total, including journalists, prison officials, and some of the victims' family members, watched in silence. Bundy's mother, Louise, was not present. Both she and Bundy had agreed that she should not endure the agony of witnessing his execution. When asked if he had any final words, Bundy looked at his attorney and spiritual advisor and simply said, "Jim and Fred, I'd like you to give my love to my family and friends."
Do you have a final statement you'd like to make?
Yes. Tell my family I love them.
Then the executioner pulled the switch, sending 2,000 volts of electricity coursing through Bundy's body. Witnesses reported seeing his body tense and contorted in pain, but the end came quickly. Within minutes, the lady killer was pronounced dead.
Ted Bundy was executed for the murder of a 12-year-old girl in Florida.
The time of death was recorded at 7:16 a.m., marking the end of a chapter in American criminal history that had captivated and horrified the world. Outside the prison, the crowd erupted in celebration as news of Bundy's death was confirmed. Fireworks lit up the sky, cheers rang out, and signs waved triumphantly in the air. For many, Bundy's execution was a moment of justice, a symbolic end to the nightmare he had inflicted on so many. The chants of "Burn, Bundy, burn" echoed in the night, a collective exhalation of relief that the monster was finally gone. In the days that followed, Bundy's body was cremated, but the fate of his ashes remains shrouded in mystery. Some reports suggest they were scattered in the Cascade Mountains, a place tied to many of his crimes, though this remains unconfirmed. There was no public funeral, no mourning for a man who had caused so much pain. His death was the final chapter in a story that had captivated and horrified the world. A tale of monstrous evil hidden behind a mask of charm. Ted Bundy's final 24 hours were a chilling mix of fear, resignation, and brief moments of human connection. His life had been defined by manipulation, deception, and brutality. But in the end, there was no escaping the justice that finally caught up with him. The debate over whether to feel compassion for Bundy in his final moments or to see his death as a just reward for his heinous crimes lingers on. Can you feel compassion for a lost soul facing death? Or do you think this is the just reward for such a monster? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more content like this.